Hi, I'm Dave Glazer. I'm a personal trainer, TikTok creator, and founder of Dave Glazer Coaching. After a couple of breakups in 2017, I became obsessed with understanding relationships, the way people connect, and along this journey, I have created a life and podcast dedicated to lifelong learning and exploring how we communicate with each other through modern dating and text messaging, social media, and dating apps. This podcast brings the industry's top experts in relationship. Through best-selling authors, speakers, and real-life daters, we discuss the struggles, the celebrations, the fears we face, and all the wonder that relationships can bring into our lives. Please subscribe to the podcast and connect with me on Instagram and TikTok to take a candid look into modern dating. On this week's episode of the podcast, we invite back Stuart Motola for a follow-up interview. He and I sat down over 3 years ago when the podcast was first starting, and we talked about his book that he published, Fixing You is Killing Me. Stuart is a men's relationship coach who offers guys and couples concrete strategies for how to get unstuck in relationship. With over 15 years working with thousands of men on their relationships and personal growth, Stuart realizes a unique system that breaks the patterns that keep men tied up in frustrating relationships. Unlike many therapists and couples counselors who can frustrate guys with excessive talking, Stuart focuses on explicit action. His unique process offers each man a clear and direct roadmap of progress to create lasting positive results. Stuart and I really dig deep into what comes up for men as they cheat in their relationships. And we take that approach from the lens of a nice guy. The nice guy syndrome is something that he and I both relate to, as in past relationships, that pattern has shown up. We dig in deep to the psyche of the nice guy, as well as many other topics men are facing today. Without further delay, let's get into today's episode with Stuart Motola. Welcome back to the podcast, Stuart Motola. How are you, sir?
Doing good, Dave. Great to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, likewise. It has been a while. We recorded for the first time about 3.5 years ago when the podcast was still brand new, and we discussed your book, How Fixing You is Killing Me.
Yep.
And we were just briefly talking about that for a moment.
In a nutshell, without traversing the entirety of a 25-year relationship, which is inclusive in the book, Fixing You is Killing Me. And just as a quick lead on what that book is, I often say it's a hybrid memoir / personal growth book, meaning each chapter alternates between my story and universal lessons. But in the course of my 25-year relationship, 20 years married, at the end of the day, I grew up in a family system where somehow I learned, and I could articulate it explicitly, that if I was not making things better for other people, I had no value. Mm-hmm. And that's, that ties into codependence, enmeshment, poor self-esteem, which was interesting because I presented very confidently, and I could put on a good macho front, but underneath, well, as you know, and your listeners probably know, there's a whole different set of rules for primary relationship than the superficial interactions in the external world, and it's in that primary relationship where those deeper dynamics, such as in my case, I have no value if I'm not providing value for you, played out. Mm-hmm. And it's been a huge part of my career path as a men's relationship coach, and working with couples more and more to teach them how their value needs to stand at some level independent and autonomous of their partner, not so for themselves, and paradoxically, it makes them a much better partner. Because what a burden to put that on your partner. Be responsible for my self-worth. And I have a sentence in the book that says something like, "Fill me, and then I will hate you when you fail." This unconscious mechanism that often plays out.
Right. Yeah, that's big. And there's a lot there. And one major thing that jumped out at me was you mentioned family systems and how it relates to your primary relationship as an adult. I can relate to that a lot because the family system that I grew up in kept me quiet, kept me lacking self-confidence, and that showed up in my adult relationships as well.
Yeah. And I'm raising my hand right now. Me too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Glad to hear that resonates.
Yeah. I do specialize in working with men, and I coach more and more women how to, be in relationship with their man. And over the last 40, 50 years, we've seen a huge development of, let's call it, the nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
The guy actually created a social media post recently that said, "You won't heal the patriarchy by taking on your woman's abuse."
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Digest that. A lot of the guys who were raised in the last 40 years don't want to become the macho asshole, the macho jerk, the perpetrator who obviously the Me Too movement has been a huge backlash against that guy. So if I spend so much time trying to not be a certain guy, I'm living in an anti-identity.
Mm-hmm.
And we can say there's another anti-identity for men. You ask what's masculinity or manhood, and people who haven't really thought a lot about this can say how through their childhood, in a nutshell, it was not being a girl.
Mm-hmm.
So again, another anti-identity, meaning your identity is revolving around something that you're not, instead
Mm-hmm.
of clarity about who you are. And in the case of the nice guy, he's pivoted so much on not being the macho jerk that he loses a lot of the traits that would often be very attractive to a partner, such as stability, strength, confidence, courage. But the nice guy doesn't understand that he can have those traits and still have tenderness, sensitivity, softness,
Kindness. Yeah.
kindness.
Yeah.
And so it's a great, piece for guys who swing to that nice guy side. And, if you really want to go into it, you could go watch Fight Club and, hear
Yes,
Brad
right.
Pitt talk about a generation of men raised by women. And then Robert Glover, who wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy, talks about, again, last 40, 50 years. I mean, we could say post World War II, the men left the home to go do work, and there weren't men around to teach the boys, how to be men. And obviously sometimes that was a very negative teaching of manhood domination, as opposed to the more what I often call generative. In my work, I talk a lot about sovereignty, which is essentially like kingship. How do you protect your domain, your environment? How do you have boundaries? How do you have clarity about how you communicate? How do you make clear agreements? I have a few clients who say things like, if I don't do it right, I might get in trouble. And what I like to reframe that to is I say, no, actually, if you don't make clear agreements, your relationship might be in trouble. And so agreements are an act of assertion. You got to have some confidence to make agreements, a willingness to know that you might not get what you want, but a sense of inner authority that knows I'll be okay if I don't get what I want. And I'll also be clear on what my bottom line is. And I'll say one more thing here. I know I'm,
no, it's okay.
Going off here. I love what a mentor of mine said. Slaves have no bottom lines. Without a bottom line, you make for a terrible partner. Slaves make terrible partners. And so it's not so much of a hard, rigid bottom line or a hard, rigid boundary, but at least a clarity of it could be as simple as, sweetie, it's not about the dishes in the sink. It's about respecting my desire for an orderly environment. And it's about respect and trust. It's not about dishes.
Yeah, it's not about the nail, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the nail in the head video.
Yeah, love it.
But I feel like I went full circle, but I think coming back to the the nice guy, the anti-identity syndrome, and the sovereignty concept, which
Mm-hmm.
I define as being in integrity with your authentic wants, needs, and identity.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of men and women, they don't even really know what they want. They think they do on the top level, but they're stuck in it's the dishes, and it's not the
Yeah.
dishes. It's
It's not the
trust,
dishes. Yeah.
respect, the ability to be heard, seen, connected, safe, but not too safe, because too much safety destroys passion.
Yeah.
And I'll
It
end with
equates to
one.
boredom. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll end with one last quote that I've really been riffing on a lot. Tony Robbins said, "The level of passion in a relationship is commensurate with the level of risk you're willing to tolerate." And I often have to say that twice.
Yeah. I think we'll come back to that to get clear on risks you're willing to tolerate. So,
Yeah.
but before we do, I want to get clear on how men leaving the household and going off to work post World War II. To me, that sounds a lot like leadership. It sounds a lot like provider in the household. And it also created an environment in the household where the next generation of boys was raised by women. And I want to get clear on that and how it created the nice guy syndrome for men who were raised by women. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I'm 3 years old. I'm four. I'm 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Who am I answering to? My mother,
Mom, yeah.
female kindergarten teacher, female
Mm,
first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade teacher. We still see this. So it's all through the lens of a female. It's all through the lens of pleasing a woman. So now we take this behavior into a relationship 20, 30 years later, and we think, I better do it right or I'm going to get in trouble.
mm-hmm.
Whereas a positive, healthy masculine presence would give a container. There's no container typically between an adult woman and a young boy besides, be a good boy, don't get hurt, protect yourself, you know, behave yourself in school or whatever it is. So it's very much about pleasing the female.
Mhm. Yeah, what I hear there is that if classic Dr. Glover, if I'm a good boy, I will get what I want, which is very short-term thinking for me in a relationship. It might work in the first few weeks or first few months of a relationship. And then that bottom line that the nice guy doesn't stand up for himself begins to appear in a relationship. And the feminine starts to see through that. And they're like, all right, you are not as grounded or in aligned with your integrity as I thought maybe you were. And it becomes exposed that that people pleaser is manipulative in a relationship.
Yes, she starts to see. At first, she's really attracted. It's like, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's sweet. He's loving. He really thinks about me. And then she starts to see through it that, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
actually, this is not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And so Glover also talks about how the nice guy is really a dishonest asshole who doesn't have the balls to say what he really wants, which is harsh, but let's just cut through the bullshit for a second.
Yeah,
I
sometimes
can
men
say
need
that
a
was
wake-up
I can
call.
say that was true
Right?
for me.
Yeah, same.
And I
Yeah.
had elders and mentors who 2x4 to the head. Life will give you the 2x4 to the head. But yes, there's the polarity that starts to diminish between the masculine and the feminine, and then there's the lack of trust from the feminine and the desire for, I watched this video recently and talked about containment, how the masculine provides like that containment, that structure. And this may sound cliche, and I know that we're evolving past gender, etc. But again, I think we get a lot of great ideas in our culture, and then we take them to such an extreme. There's still a lot of people who identify in those traditional masculine feminine, and those who don't are still working with a sense of those two energies. And there's 3 or 4 energies as well that just be too much to go into in this podcast.
Yeah.
But when the masculine can tend to, I'll give a ground level example. A guy's like, she talks forever, I can't follow her words, and then she's upset at me that I didn't hear her. Well, I say, you didn't provide a container for her, brother. You didn't provide a container for yourself. Actually just was giving some support towards a mentor of mine, which was really amazing because typically he's giving me the support. And he couldn't hold on to how much his partner wanted to speak, and just have him be there and not do anything. Again, back to the nail in the head video, which is not to fix it but to be heard and seen. Now the thing is, there's a way in which a man can bring his mission mindedness, because typically as a dude, the masculine, again, just going with the general association here of the masculine in a man, he can provide, he can channel his need to be on purpose in that interaction by, after 3 or 4 minutes, saying, sweetie, let me pause you. This is just simple active listening. Let me pause you and repeat back to make sure I got everything you said. So now he brings his mission to just, my job's to make sure she's heard. And I'm going to interrupt her after 4 or 5 minutes till I hit that point of where, oh shit, I'm starting to check out. I'm getting overwhelmed. That's his signal to himself, like, get present, get back in, create the container. Take masculine leadership. Sweetie, I'm going to pause you. I heard A, B, C. Did I get that right? And she says, yes, no. Is there more? And so that fix it attitude gets channeled into, my job is to repeat back what she said, make sure she's heard. And now I can feel like I'm an active participant in this exchange, and not just having to listen and listen and listen to the point where I'm checking out, I'm overwhelmed, I'm doing circles, I can't follow her, I don't know what the hell's going on. And then she's upset at me because I didn't do it right. Well, I didn't provide any containment for the interaction. And when I do provide that containment, she can relax more, feel fully seen, heard, respected, trusted. And I often say to guys is that, again, I won't be a cliche here, so forgive me, women out there, 8 to 10 minutes or 12 to 20 minute, lecture, rant, dumping, whatever it is. Often after that 3 or 4 minutes, she's like, yeah, you really heard me there. Thanks. I'm good. And they're just like, oh, wow. Yeah, that was awesome. So again, nice guys don't know how to do containment. They don't even know that that's a valuable thing to provide for the feminine.
Yeah, I can see the value in the structure that you're describing there of like, hey, let me just get clear on what I think I heard you say there. And then that asking of the question of like, did I get that right? Did I hear you correctly?
Huge.
It's so huge. It would make me feel heard. Absolutely. As a person who also wants to be heard and also wants to be listened to. And I hear a connection between leadership, assertiveness, and not being able to hold that container. If it's a 12 to 20 minute rant, then it almost feels as if like the person listening is just getting walked all over. Yeah. They're not a participant in the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating you say that, because one of the biggest things I like I run a Facebook group for men, and I just did the true or false. I walk on eggshells around my partner, and it was just like true, 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 true. Okay. And now the way that this relates is a man who's walking on eggshells will experience a lot of risk to interrupt his partner after 4 minutes and say, sweetie, I want to make sure I got you. I want to make sure he will, because he walks on eggshells. He's like, there's no way I'm interrupting her. Then I'll really get a beating. And so a lot of my work with men and with women too, is to say, let's break this down into baby steps and find the risk that is not overwhelming to you, so that you can step in to, be an active listener, to not self-sabotage yourself, to not self-sabotage or couple sabotage, because when you sabotage yourself by, oh, I have no other choices but to listen for 20 minutes and be overwhelmed, that's a form of self-sabotage. And that's a form of relational sabotage. but which is essentially walking on eggshells. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm willing to put aside that part of me, and we might say that guy who wants to walk on eggshells, or that part of me, is a protector. He's trying to
Yeah.
protect me from conflict, from things escalating. But if I put that side apart and I'm willing to just step in at the level of risk that doesn't feel overwhelming, which might just be like, sweetie, can we just pause for a second? I'm just catching my breath to make sure I'm with you, because it's so important to me that I'm with you, because I want to be connected with you. You're the woman I chose to be with, and you know, I want to make sure I'm taking it all in. And it might just be that he might not be ready to do the repeating or the, you know, saying what he
Right.
heard. So
Right.
I try to find a really simple step that can at least move the needle forward a little bit. And so, you know, what you had said made me think about risk is such a big
Right.
thing. And when people find the risk overwhelming, they don't realize we can break risk down into typically 4 or 5 steps and find the one that can get you in the room. Because, you know, we know at the end of the day, any of us who are working in this field, we're teaching a level of risk resilience, you know, and that's the key to honoring the baseline safety we all need, but then challenging the safety that just keeps us stuck in dead
Mm-hmm.
relationships
And bored. Yeah.
and bored.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you talking about the risk that you're taking is deeply connecting if it's done respectfully with kindness. And there's a touch about boundaries in there too, of like, if our partner is allowed to just dump all of their stuff on us, male or female, well, then there's no boundary there, like you were describing, in the container that the masculine energy can bring to a conversation. And I think that clears up a little bit about the Tony Robbins quote. And where I wanted to get clear on is the difference between the risks I'm willing to take and the risks I'm willing to tolerate. Let's dig into the difference there.
Yeah, I'm digesting that. Willing to take versus willing to tolerate. Yeah, now we're getting to really subtle area. And this is where I'll encourage an individual, and any of your listeners out there, pay attention to your nervous system. You know, notice where fear's coming up. Notice where you're shutting down. Notice where you're checking out. Notice where you want to retreat and withdraw. And notice that's a part of you. That's not you. So I'll often say to people I coach, notice the difference between I am fear versus I am feeling fear. Okay. And what does that fear want from me? Well, fear typically has the headline of, I want you to be safe. Safe from what? Safe from conflict. Safe from escalation. Safe. So there's a little bit of a process in which I'll work with people to help them understand what would come up with the risks they're willing to take. And in that exploration, the chasm between what the risks they're willing to take versus the risks they're willing to tolerate narrows, and it doesn't feel like the Grand Canyon anymore. And so their toleration level gets much greater, and their ability, you know, I'll often reference, are you in your child or are you in your adult? Because usually it's the younger part of us that's really scared. Whereas the older part can acknowledge the younger part and say, it's okay, little guy. It's okay, little girl. We can be in the room, and I'm going to be there, you know, making sure that you're protected, that I'm safe, and that we can take some risks here so that we can have a more fulfilling, engaging, and satisfying relationship and means of working through conflict. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people say to me, well, should I stay with this partner or not? And you know, how do I know if this is the one? And I just say, do you feel a sense of home in your partner? Psychological home, emotional home, sexual home. You know, home, that sense of home, that seems to be the distinguishing factor between a long-term relationship and a hookup and friends with benefits. home is the place where you're going to step in more, you're going to commit, you're trying to build a home, you want to furnish it, you want to
Yeah.
create that. And a key to creating a home is the biggest that I find is the ability to use conflict as an opportunity to build trust instead of erode it. And once both partners get adept at that, suddenly conflict's not as scary, and the relationship can have a stability. And I often like to say, once it has more stability, it has more tolerance for risk to do, sexual fantasy or whatever you'd want to step into,
Right.
to keep that spark alive. So it's a kind of a paradox. You need a level of safety to step into a level of risk, et cetera, et cetera.
I would agree with that. And a distinction that I want to get clear on is the difference between feeling familiar, like your family system, and feeling like home. Oftentimes those
Well
two
said.
things are confused, because if I'm working on myself, if I'm taking care of my own needs, desires, and wants in a relationship first and understanding what those are, well, then I can co-create that home like feeling with a partner.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, so I think what you're referring to here, and let me know if I got this right, is your sense of home is not just with the partner. The sense of home is between you and you as well.
Yeah. The person I spend the most time with is myself.
Yeah.
And I would like that relationship to be one of the strongest ones that I have, so that a partner can come in and be icing on the cake, or can be a complement to my world as opposed to becoming my whole world, which is typical nice guy behavior. And digging back into the difference between the risks I'm willing to take and the risks I'm willing to tolerate is that tolerance comes from that resilience, and that the resilience that you were referring to earlier in your nervous system.
Yes.
I can tolerate more risk taking in my life because I'm grounded, because these decisions are coming from a grounded place and not an emotionally responsive place. Does that resonate? Does that get clear?
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I'm a big fan of Parts work and Richard Schwartz IFS work, which, its predecessor was Gestalt, voice dialogue, all that stuff that practitioners know. But it's essentially calling out a part of you and knowing that that's just a part, that's not you. And I thought about that in relationship to what you were speaking about, to that calmer part of you, to which again I would refer to as that sovereign. I am sitting on the throne of my life. Yes, I am aware that once in a while fear will take the throne. A hyper doer will take the throne. A hyper thinker, when I go into an analysis paralysis, will take the throne. But when am I aware of when I am not, in that executive role, king role, queen role, sovereign role? I am sitting on the throne to look at fear, to look at the hyper doer, the hyper thinker, as parts of me that want something, and I can transform them from enemies into allies, advisors. And that's, we can just say, yeah, you got to be calm, and if you're calm in yourself, you'll be a better relational partner. But we've fragmented, and we live in a culture of fragmentation. I mean, anytime anyone's commercials telling us we need to look more pretty, or we need to take a pill to alleviate a certain pain, it's essentially an anti-sovereign message. And I would say, again, that sense of being your executive, your sovereign, so that you can stay calm, back to to tolerate more risk.
Yeah, I love that distinction between the two, and I'm getting clearer on it. And speaking of the nice guy not being able to tolerate his environment very well, that's a tendency of the nice guys to disassociate from the part that is afraid or is scared or hurt. And let's just say that the nice guy has found a partner and he's doing his manipulative, people-pleasing behavior, And the feminine starts to see through that and starts to get a little bit lacking trust in the relationship. And then all of this unrest and chaos begins to kind of stir within the part of the nice guy that's there. And instead of addressing the problem, he goes outside of the relationship to get his needs met. Instead of asking for his needs to be met within the container of the relationship, he goes to an external source like cheating or going outside for validation. Let's dig into that. Like, what comes up for you when I describe that scenario?
Well, offhand, it's pretty rare. The nice guy is typically going to take it. He's going to go into martyrdom, meaning he will, he's going to repress parts of him at such a level. So the guy that you're describing might be 5% of the nice guys, where they go into polarity. They've been repressing the asshole. So they explode, into that other polarity. I would tend to say the guy who goes outside of the relationship has less of the nice guy profile, and has more of them, she's not satisfying me. That's a different orientation. The nice guy's orientation is always about how am I making her happy? Whereas I see the guy who goes outside of the relationship is thinking, how is she making me happy? Is she meeting my needs? And so and not to say that guy, and I don't want to call him the macho jerk or the asshole, because there's a lot of good guys that I've spoken with who do go outside the relationship and they know it's screwed up and they feel crappy about it. And they don't want to really keep doing it for too long. And that's why they'll contact me at times. But basically the context of everything we're talking about is withholds and shadows. I withhold a part of me, and that guy who goes outside of the relationship, I'll say, well, let's use that adultery or that extramarital affair to extract the information that you've withholded from bringing into your relationship. Again, back to that conversation of risk. Let's identify a risk that is significant enough to move the needle forward so that you don't have to go outside the marriage, but not so massive that's going to overwhelm the hell out of you and you're not going to do it. But let's identify that risk for you to step forward, whether that's as simple as like, sweetie, I got something I want to talk to you about. Is now a good time? Asking permission to have a hard conversation is such a foreign concept for so many people. And it feels really risky because what if they say no? Or what if they just blow me off or stonewall? And typically we don't even break it down to that first step of permission because we think, I just got to get it all done. And we're lazy, and it's not so much a judgment to say that we're lazy. We know through the study of human development that we're constantly seeking the path of least effort to go through life. And that's part of what, I'm trying to do, you're trying to do, to help people understand that that path of least effort is also the path of least fulfillment. So again, back to the guy who's, been having the affair, he typically knows, unless he's compartmentalized to a point where he's completely unwilling to acknowledge how there's energy in that affair that's not been dealt with in his marriage, that guy I can't help. Really, probably nobody can, unless he gets a massive 2x4 to the head and things really blow up on him. But how can we bring that energy back to you and your partner, and identifying a way that you can start to bring some of that energy to your relationship?
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection. It brings up a lot of questions for me, and less of a question and more of a pointing out of something really expansive that you said in there, is that avoiding conflict is part of that intolerance to taking risks. And what is not understood is that avoiding conflict is also avoiding connection, because when
Well said.
conflict is handled in a healthy, mindful, kind way, it can be deeply connecting.
Huge, huge, huge. For me to get through an interaction, so I'm with a couple and they're both getting jacked up and I'm calling time out. I'm being that third entity that's holding container and structure for them. And yet then I'm encouraging them to go do that on their own, but I'm creating that model, helping them understand that in that moment of conflict and being jacked up, go be with yourself. Go get back to your adult, go get back to your center, call the timeout, take care of yourself. And for the partner to see, wow, they're really jacked up. This is really hard for them. I want to give them that so that they can come back to me. And as much as I want to lay into them and say, you always run away, you never hear me, you're freaking running away again. My job is to help them understand, like, listen, they need to take a breath or a moment here. And that's in an extreme example, but most of the time I can help two individuals stay in the room, get through conflict, mostly by just, you're talking for 3 minutes. Your job is to, the other partner, your job is just to reflect what you heard them say. And I like to say that just hearing each other and not even worrying about agreeing. One of my huge tenets is be relational, be connected versus be right. Be right is a 8, 10, 12, 14, 15-year-old's perspective. Be relational is an adult perspective. Because in the day, when I see, like yesterday, I saw the couple afterwards, they're hugging. I'm like, and I could feel the heart energy and they're just loving on each other. I'm like, this is why you're together, not to be right. It's to experience this depth of connection. Yeah. So what I'm alluding to is I can help a couple experience connection through terrain that they've, pretty much blown up in conflict with for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
And I can give them a small experience of that, not to say it fixes and resolves that 20 years of resentment or whatever, but it's now starts to say, oh, okay, we can actually do this. We may not, like at one point, the female partner was like ready to lay it on more. You know how like women sometimes do, like, that's great, that you got that, but you're not getting this. And I said, sweetie, you got 50% of what you wanted. You got 60%. It's a hell of a lot more than what you've been getting. So savor that 50, 60%, let go of that 40, 50% that you're not getting, and know that that's for the next time. This is a marathon. This is not a one and done. And suddenly she relaxes and she's like, yeah, 50, 60% is a hell of a lot better than the 5% I've been getting lately.
I would call that a win. Definitely.
Yeah. And so, we just, and I love it too, because I'm like, and this also tests, like, are you willing to be patient? Are you willing to, flex these new quote unquote conflict muscles, to do it in a better way? So I love what you said about, how key it is to navigate conflict well, to create that trust. And I'll go back to what you said before, that sense of home. And when you were talking about home, oh, okay, maybe I go back to what's familiar, what's safe. I think most of us have a different idea of the home we want to create than the home that we grew up in.
Yeah, you would hope, right?
I think a good amount of us do, whether it's conscious or not. For some of us, it needs to be articulated. And there's a sense of loyalty to the parents that some people might be unwilling to betray. But I really try to point out to them, that's not your adult self. That's your old loyal child,
Thank you very much for that. And I've heard you mention a couple of times agreements. I'm a huge fan of relationship agreements. And I'm also a fan of developing conflict agreements with a partner as well. Of like, when I feel dysregulated or when I feel out of my adult self, I need this. And when I'm upfront and it's agreed upon before conflict happens, it helps me navigate conflict so much more so from a grounded place. If I know that I can call a timeout in the middle of a conflict, well, then I can be more relational, as opposed to like, why I need to be heard, I need to be right, I need to be felt, I need to be seen. Okay, well, I'm not receiving any of those things in this conflict right now. I feel it's best for me to take a timeout and ask for that timeout.
Right. And the biggest thing I say too is when you take that time out, make sure you're not leaving the partner hanging. You're saying, sweetie, let's check in 20 minutes. Let's check in tonight. You're rescheduling. Huge, huge, huge.
Yeah, I can see that happening in the modern world quite a bit over text message.
Yeah.
Like,
Text message is funky.
I wouldn't
I
recommend.
don't
I wouldn't
do it.
recommend
Yeah. So
conflict
for all
over.
the 20 somethings out there, just get that, as satisfying it is to really, lay it on them and, be heard. Again, is that about being right, or is that about being relational?
Yeah, I've recently asked for a break. Hey, I'm having some stuff come up for me, and this conversation was over text. I'm having some things come up for me that I would like to process. What's your schedule like tonight or tomorrow to check in on a phone call? Because at the time, I really did not want to have the conversation I was having over text message. It's not connecting for me.
Right. And I'm going back to what you said about agreements. I also add in there structures to have hard conversations. So we may have an agreement that we're going to use the structure. And sometimes I like to say just this simple cell phone has a timer on it. And so one of the structures to create safety in an agreement is I'm going to talk until this thing goes off, and I'm setting it for 5 minutes. And then we're both going to take a breath, and then you're going to have 5 minutes to reflect back what I said. Now that's just a simple structure, okay, that can plug people into, again, being seen, being heard by their partner, knowing, like, if I have to reflect back to my partner, I mean, this is extreme. I once reflected back to a partner and it may sound patronizing, but it was what I heard. I hear you thinking I'm an asshole. I mean, I wasn't taking that on for me. Again, that refers back to what you said about having a safe home within yourself. I needed a safe home within myself to know that I wasn't an asshole, but to have compassion to my partner to say, oh, she's having an unmet need right now. And I don't know exactly what it is, but in that moment, I just reflected back. I hear you saying I'm an asshole, that I don't hear you, that I'm not seeing you. I don't have to agree with it. My job is just to make sure they're heard. And some people might say, well, then you're taking shit and you're getting walked on. And I'm like, I don't think so, because I'm not actually taking on the asshole behavior of the partner. I'm just hearing the communication. Again, this is super extreme. This rarely ever happens. And I'm using a very extreme example just to prove a point that, I had to restrain a part of me that wanted to say, well, I'm an asshole. You're a fucking, excuse my language. You're this and you're, I was just like, no, my job is to really hear her. And, and then when it was my chance to reflect, I incorporated some of the self-advocacy in my share, in my, speaking, the impact of being called an asshole, then I get to speak that.
Yeah, that's a lot clearer to me. Structure is certainly something that I want to bring to my partnership: clarity, direction, assertiveness, and also boundaries too, that neither one of us should be walked all over or would want to be walked all over. And if respect is one of my core values, then I'm going to ensure that that doesn't become predominant in conflict or in a relationship.
I appreciate you bringing up respect. Respect seems to be like I don't know, it's like an old school value that seems to be lost, but it's so critical. I'm not talking, people have mistaken respect with obedience or subservience. I love to say power with your partner, not power over or power under.
Right.
Nice guys have power under syndrome. Power with is a level of respect is super sexy, and like, hell yeah, we're both in our power.
Right.
That I appreciate you bringing in the respect concept.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And we'll close it out with a quick reflection on that power under for the nice guy. I've seen some tendencies for that. When I feel less power, or when I feel that power under, I'll use passive aggressiveness or resentment to get what I need. And that's a conversation for another day. But I think that that's a powerful thing to leave our audience with today.
Yeah, appreciate you mentioning that. Appreciate the time. Super fun and great to connect with you, Dave.
Yeah, Stuart, I'm glad that we got a chance to catch up after it's been so long, and welcome home. I heard you've been traveling quite a bit.
I had 3 months in Spain, a few months in Nevada City. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina now, and it's been a great just exploration of where I want to call home
Mm,
as I approach the second half of my life.
right. And if people want to get a hold of you and want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, just simply my name, stuartmotola.com, StuartMotola. YouTube's a primary avenue of how I connect with people through weekly videos.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I'll be sure to put that in the show notes below.
Absolutely. A pleasure and an honor, Dave.
Thank you. Likewise. Yeah, talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so very much for tuning in to this week's episode with Stuart Motola. I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. And to expand on what we were discussing, and Stuart and I were discussing our differences of opinion, and I believe that discourse in our community is a great thing to help us learn and grow. As we were discussing the nice guy cheating in a relationship or the asshole cheating in the relationship, I heard that Stuart and I had a difference of opinions there. And I wanted to clarify a little bit about the tendency of the nice guy. The context at which we were discussing that nice guy cheating in a relationship comes from a place of not wanting to hurt their partner. The nice guy may go outside of the relationship for validation, yes, but he goes outside of the relationship and doesn't end his current one because he doesn't want to hurt his partner's feelings. He wants to spare them from the hurt. And this is a self-sabotaging behavior for the nice guy, because by choosing to go outside the relationship and cheat, he will ultimately get caught, self-sabotage the relationship, and that could lead to ending of the relationship, which is a subconscious choice that he's making to not just end it appropriately, consciously, and respectfully and kindly with his current partner so that he can pursue other, in this context, pursuing other places for validation, sad to say. So instead of ripping off the Band-Aid, having the hard conversation and facing his reality, the nice guy self-sabotages by going outside the relationship, almost wanting to get caught so his partner will end the relationship for them both and he won't have to do it himself. That's a pattern that I see show up in nice guy syndrome as I coach people. It's a hard conversation to have no matter where you're coming from, whether that be you breaking off the relationship or the other person ending the relationship. It's never an easy conversation and can result in conflict. That's something that the nice guy syndrome and those who suffer from it steer clear of. They choose not to have conflict. Hope that clarifies that section of our conversation as we are having it today. And if you have any further follow-up questions about how nice guy syndrome shows up in your relationship with your partner, or you're the partner experiencing nice guy syndrome, don't hesitate to reach out for a little bit more of a conversation about your individual situation. You can connect with me at daveglazer.com, on Instagram at daveglazer_CSCS, or on TikTok at dave.glazer. Until next week, this is Dave Glazer, wishing you health and happiness wherever you're at in the world.